Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, Mount Nimba to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, hey, in diaspora, current affairs, hey, reliable information, history, ooh, talking about culture, yeah, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
And I am Anson Essier, and a pleasant welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is a special edition of our program here, and we are happy to welcome you to this broadcast. I am co-hosting along with Dr. George Williams. Dad, welcome. How you doing?
I'm great, Anthony. Thank you so much for facilitating this event. We're glad to have with us Dr. Villa Clinton and Anthony Samuel Hare King to share with us from a professional perspective and to comment on some of the issues that have evolved and taken our airwaves in recent weeks. It's been at least 2 weeks now since the incident around and involving Mr. Sam Jackson, his wife, and we thought that it was important that Liberians had a chance to chip in on how a conversation of this nature is needed in terms of helping us understand and appreciate the transformation that must take place in our society. Historically, many of us on this platform and within the airwaves have lived out this situation before, and without any attempts to indict or preempt what the investigations that are ongoing. But too many of us Liberians have been either victims or witnesses to what we've seen unfold in recent days. And for us here on Focus on Liberia, we thought it'd be a good thing, a great thing that, in terms of social renewal, national transformation, that these issues be brought to the table and discussed from a more intellectual and legal standpoint. And so we've invited, two key Liberian experts in their respective fields. We have Dr. Villa Clinton, who is a mental health specialist. We've seen mental health play out in this situation at so many different levels. Utterances made by Mr. Jackson, attitudes and attributes that have shown up as a result of this process, even with the victim. Even with the victim, there is an explanation. Theoretically, there are explanations. You look at the theory, you look at the social attributes of the victim and the perpetrator, quote unquote, without trying to prejudice the investigation. We see a lot coming out. And so we've invited Dr. Clinton to help us understand and do I say appreciate, for lack of a better word, appreciate the landscape of gender-based violence and how such things play out and show up in our society, in our households, in our society today. And Anthony King, who is the dukes of her class at the law school when she graduated and now works for one of the most reputable law firms in the country, but a woman herself to lend her expertise in terms of the legal environment, the legal recourse that women and men, not just women and men, have in such situations. And so we're happy to have both of you here. We are honored. We on Focus on Liberia are honored and humbled by your presence and giving us your time. So welcome to the both of you from us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Dr. Clinton? Yes, sir. And so we like to...
Thank you, sir. I'm also honored and humbled.
Thank you. Thank you. And so let's keep this conversation started. And let's start with Dr. Clinton, since he's more from a mental health background, but I also see him more as a psychologist, understanding the ways we think and how the ways we think contribute to how we behave. Dr. Clinton, from your professional background, how would you and what would you say characterizing what has happened recently, but also looking at it from a historical standpoint? What has occurred in our society, not just with this event, but historically, we've seen this play out at so many different levels, at so many levels. What plays out in such scenarios? What is going on so that we understand why it's happening and continues to happen?
Thank you for the question.
Dr. Clinton,
yes,
please, before you can come in, and Dr. Williams, thanks for that brilliant question with that premise as well. Focus on Liberia, our start of presentation is more about educating. So I would like us to first give the definition for the subject we are about to discuss. And so I will complement Dr. Williams' question to say, from your respective field, and starting with you, Dr. Clinton, mental health, how do you define gender-based violence, and what does the current scale of GBV in Liberia actually tells us about the urgency that this crisis actually demands?
All right, thank you for the addition. Now, let me start off by saying, for some strange reason, culturally, Liberia has defined gender to mean women.
Okay.
It's always been funny to me. Every time when you hear gender ministry, that's advocacy for women. Everything you hear gender-based is for women. But gender is just as equally defined to men as it is to women, right?
Yeah.
So gender-based violence, in mind, for a working definition, gender-based violence is violence directed at any particular person from the significant other who is seeking power and control. So there is sometimes the confusion of anger issue and gender-based violence, which I want to differentiate only because in the gender-based violence situation, people is driven by the need for power and control. Whereas people who have anger management issues, they just have anger management issues, so they get angry. Let me just add, in addition to the mental health specialist, so I do work as I do consult with a domestic violence agency where I serve as prevention. So, having said that, when I usually ask domestic violence perpetrators, when you go to court and the judge says something that makes you angry, what do? Why don't you go off on the judge if it's just anger management? But in the domestic relationship, people are struggling for power and control, and this is where we end up. When it comes specifically to Liberia, but let me also say that I see this as a global epidemic, so it's not specific to Liberia. However, when it comes to Liberia as a third world country, it appears to me that the lack of statistics is feeding the lack of awareness. And then there are also shortcoming in advocacy. Now, we can have all the conversations we want to have on different platforms in different private settings. Nothing gets to the top or to the public unless we bring it to the public. And in my review of all of this and all of the publicity that has come with it, I see people are posting, oh, I've never laid hands on a woman. Doesn't mean you have not necessarily been abusive, because the abuse comes in types. All right. So we have physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. And until we know these things, sometimes we're not even aware of what we're doing or how our behaviors affect the other person or the community or the nation in general. So historically, I can speak not from statistics with Liberia, but I speak to statistics from America. So years ago, domestic violence was basically something happened between people in a relationship. The police will show up and don't necessarily have to make an arrest until somewhere in the 70s. And there was a case with a lady called Heather Nussbaum, and Heather was dating a renowned lawyer in New York, and his name was Joel Steinberg. But he was abusive, but he was very charismatic. And she dated him, and she was like an editor at a printing press, a publishing company. And for years in their relationship, she endured different forms of abuse, not recognizing what it was. And then eventually, long story short, they adopted a child. And in his attempt to discipline this child, the child ended up dying from physical. Yes. So not to mention that Heather had a broken nose. She got a broken knee. He literally put her in the bathtub and poured ice on her to heal her rather than go into the hospital. She had to give her her job. He drove away her friends, and just the typical signs that were supposed to inform her, she missed, and she endured that relationship forever until that child died and an investigation became necessary. So moving forward, it was mandated that when you get to the scene as a police officer and you have a reason to, an arrest is mandated, and then we go from there. So even over here, if the victim decides that I don't want to press charges, the state will press charges. To make sure that you get the consequences of your behavior. Unlike third world countries where that system is not in place as far as I can recall. And so That is just a premise that we can work against, of from to kind of not initiate, but continue the national discourse that informs people, educate people, including be done or what should be done. People will fight against what they shouldn't accept, and people will be aware of what shouldn't happen, and so they govern themselves accordingly.
Thank you. Anthony Kane, same question. What's your definition? How will you define gender-based violence so that our audience know what it actually is before we move forward to discussing further how it affects the larger society?
Okay, so when I think gender-based violence, the word gender basically just means male or female, not necessarily female or woman. So gender-based violence would mean violence against a man or against a woman. So violence in itself under our law is prohibited, because even under our constitution, which is the original law of Liberia, every person has a right to protection of your person. So that means that no one person has the right to be violent against another person or to cause physical harm to another person. If someone is violent to you, that means you have a right to take steps to protect your person or to protect yourself against harm. So gender-based violence just basically means physical harm, emotional harm against a man or a woman.
All right. Jordan? Unmute that, please.
So our country, and again, we're going to be referring to what has happened recently as a basis for why we're having this conversation. And we'll go back and forth with the two of you. Historically, gender, and you're right. I mean, many of us, I'm sitting here, a witness of it, and I could, like Dr. Clinton said, I could indict myself as being a perpetrator as well, because we've inflicted various forms of abuse, whether it's the silent treatment at home, or the physical dispensation on our partners. That has happened. When we look at the most recent incident and some of the pictures that we see, and we're told that the qualifications of this victim was that she was a lawyer, and it brings into question, what about victims who don't have that level of qualification or aren't as sophisticated as this victim is supposed to have been? Why do you imagine, from the legal standpoint, why do you imagine most victims, not just women, but most victims, shy away from the legal recourse? Why? Is it a cultural thing? Is it legal bottlenecks? What's your perspective along those lines? Why do they endure it in the first place?
Okay, so first of all, I think that a person who has been placed in a position of violence at some point becomes conditioned to accept it. So I have spoken to one or two victims of domestic violence, and for some reason, they seem to think that their perpetrator is also their safe place. So sometimes it's not easy for a victim of domestic violence to break away from that place of conditioning. I don't know how to make sense of it because I haven't personally been in that position before, but it seems like it's some kind of trauma bonding that takes place with these violent perpetrators, right? So most perpetrators of violence that I've heard about or interacted with, to me, are master manipulators. So they will hit you, they will cause you pain, they will cause you physical harm, and then they go ahead to apologize in the most sincere looking way that will cause you to think that it was something you did that caused them to be violent towards you. So I think it's a level of manipulation that goes on in situations like that that keeps victims stuck in the situation. And then secondly, I think that it's not a very comfortable position to be in where you are proud to put your story out there. I think being a victim of domestic violence, to most victims, it is a shameful position to be in. Sometimes you are being violent to by your own spouse, the person that you chose to be with, the person that you chose to marry. And it puts you in a place where you are disappointed even in your own choices. You are ashamed of yourself. You are thinking, what will people say? What questions will people ask? Didn't you see the signs before you got married to this person? Didn't you see the signs before you got with this person? So I think it's a number of things that keep these victims in a position where they feel like they can move, where they feel like they can't seek help, and where they feel like they can't go to the law for help. Also, I think some of the violators of this law of domestic violence, they are people in high positions. So the victim will feel like these persons have contact in a country like our own where people go scot-free with things they do because they know people in position of power. It is difficult for victims to feel like they can actually obtain justice. I've interacted with victims who will say, well, what will even come out of my story? This person knows so and so person in power. This person will know the judge, or this person knows someone who knows the judge. It will just be me putting myself out there, and not really much will come out of it. So I think it's a number of things that will cause victims not to want to reach out to seek remedy.
Thank you. Let me follow up there. Let's look at the reality on the ground. Let's make it a little more Liberia specific. So, based on the cases, and I want you to continue, Anthony King, and then Dr. Clinton will come in. Based on the cases you've encountered, what forms of gender-based violence are more prevalent in Liberia today? And what social or structural factors are driving the rise of these kind of gender-based violence in Liberia?
Okay, so for the stories that we get to hear most often, it's mostly the physical violence.
Okay.
Because I think most people don't even know that there is such a thing as emotional violence
Okay.
or emotional domestic violence. So if it really comes down to it, for people to come out and tell the story, it's because they have been beaten a lot of times, they've been battered, they have sustained injuries, and so they feel like their lives are at stake and they need now to seek help. And like I think it was Dr. Williams that said in the beginning, I think domestic violence in homes are on the rise because of power struggle. Or I don't even want to put it to power struggle because I just think it's a lack of maturity in these violators. Because I think there are more matured ways in which you can handle a situation other than resolving to physical violence. For example, I've heard of a man say, oh, she was acting frisky, so I decided to put her in her place. Sir, but she's not your daughter. So why would you want to put her in her place by beating on her? Or jealousy. Take, for example, jealousy. a man is suspecting that his girlfriend or his wife is cheating on him, or that she's too close to another person of the male gender, and he wants to act, he resolves to beating on her. I think apart from power struggle, some of these violators or some of these violence perpetrators have issues that have not been resolved, that has not been dealt with, and their partners are just basically victims of them not being healed properly.
All right. Dr. Clinton, let's go to the circuit of the human, irrespective of a male or female. We're talking about the most prevalent kinds of GBV in Liberia. And my question was the factors, that driving this kind of violence to continue in Liberia.
Okay, so remember I mentioned in the beginning that it's about power and control. So it doesn't necessarily begin with the physical abuse, as Anthony King said. People may not be even aware that they are being emotionally abused, or people are perpetrating emotional abuse because, quote unquote, that's the way of living, that's the norm. But in the event of power struggle for power and control, you have to start chipping at that person's emotional state, the self-esteem. So your goal is to reduce that person to where you are now in control. They walk on eggshells around you. They think before they speak to you for fear of your reaction. So even let's just bring the cultural aspects into it. Liberia has a class system. So just because you come from this background and you marry somebody from another background that society has kind of marked as not as uppity to your background and class system, that is already a pre-existing factor. So unless that person is coming with high self-esteem, considering other factors, educational level, social status, they may think that, okay, so you're supposed to know it. So then you decide, I'm going to capitalize on this, and I'm going to seize the opportunity to be in control, to be in charge. So as the counselor was speaking, I was jotting down some points. What is driving the culture in Liberia? Back to your question. Number one is the lack of awareness. I don't think enough is done to educate people on domestic violence, gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, whatever nomenclature you will assign to that concept. But what else happens in Liberia, by my observation, is the culture of impunity. Nothing has ever really happened, regardless of the form of abuse. I mean, the significant one, from the sexual assaults to the physical violence against women or against men. Nothing has really happened. And again, I suspect that the reason, even with the legal aspect of it, the reason people don't come up is part of it is that you've already lost your self-esteem. And you already feel worthless and valueless because your abuser has told you nobody else will want you. Nobody else sees you the way I see you. Nobody else cares for you the way I care for you. And she mentioned how people spend time giving you the best apology to make you stay. So we refer to that as the cycle of violence. Okay? So it doesn't just, now when it gets to the physical violence, that's the peak. But it starts off with those small things where the abuser is walking around, even in posture that can be intimidating. The victim is walking on eggshell at the same time because she doesn't want to upset him, or he doesn't want to upset the environment. And then we move from there to where there's an argument. And even in the argument, your points are not taken as valid points because you don't make sense. And you get those little subliminal messages about, oh, I expect better from you. Or you shock me with your position on this topic. I'm surprised at you for saying. Then you start to question yourself and your own ability to be able to independently voice your opinion on some of these things. And then it goes to the point where, for example, I just give an example, but let me just make it something collective. So when people speak and say, oh, whatever tribe is second class to this class because we consider this group of people stupid people. That's a covert type of categorizing somebody, and you start to feel less because your tribe or your ethnic group of people have been identified as this, whether it's true or not. Somebody's taking it to ride on. So even if you're watching TV and something goes wrong in a movie and you cheer for the person who is actually putting out the abuse, it sends a different message to that person. But the lack of awareness. And then we move on to where, because I'm not aware, I can't even tell that I'm in an abusive relationship until it becomes physical. Once it becomes physical, I'm relying on the law to take steps to protect me or defend me. But we've seen different examples. So when it gets to that place where it becomes physical in the cycle of violence, tomorrow your abuser comes from work with a gift, with a plea, trying to appease you and apologize for the behavior. You accept, you stay, you work things up, but for how long? Okay, so we have what we call the honeymoon phase, and that's that phase when he's bringing it, or she's bringing the flowers and appeasing you until something else happens, and it can be as simple as dinner's not ready. Okay, and then something else, and then you continue, and that cycle is actually vicious. There's possibly no end to the cycle, so you just go in the cycle of violence for as long as you go. And then your pride kicks in, your ego kicks in. One person is operating on ego, the other person is on pride. Like, I can't even tell my family people that I'm being abused. I can't even tell them. But it's even in your conversations, the way he values your input, the way she values your input, the kind of subject matters that you argue about unnecessarily. Those are signs to look for, to be able to inform yourself that this can get worse. This can escalate. And then she also talked about, the counselor also talked about people having unresolved issues. Some of those issues come from childhood. Some of those issues come from the family within which you grew up, because those are the behaviors that you witnessed and copied. And you learn, you live what you learn. And then because of that, most people are lacking emotional intelligence. So even in the discussion and you disagree, they jump straight to she made me angry or he made me angry. But I always say to people, and that's another part of the conversation, hopefully, but I always say to people, anger is a secondary emotion, and we'll talk more about that when we get to it.
Thank you. And Dr. Williams, Dr. Clinton talked about not much awareness. You are an educator, and he was speaking to how much has society been educated to these violence, domestic violence, gender-based violence, and looking at our country, highly cultural, highly traditional. You know, I think him or the counselor, the Anthony have mentioned, you know, that some of these things, you know, from our upbringing. you know, where we come from, say, well, you're the man, so you're the head of the home. And I think she gave an example, well, she acted frisky, so I want to put her in her place. And that person upbringing is telling you the man. If the woman asks frisky, you put her in a place. So when Dr. Clinton talk about education awareness, you as an educator, what kind of education must be provided? Because we have the advocates for gender-based violence, there's workshop in all the places. You are aware of the level of sensitization, workshop, and all that. And yet these violence persist. The perpetrator continue. Should the education and sensitization go to the culture, our upbringing in the homes? Where do we need to focus the education, the training, in order for us to minimize this thing?
It's a great question. Frankly, education has to permeate society at all levels, starting from the home to the churches. Speaking to you, I worked a little bit supporting the work of AFL, the Association of Liberian Female Lawyers. But I think in so many ways, education and educating the populace, even with the laws, the gender-based law, the rape law, and all of those initiatives that have taken place have fallen short of actually entrenching some of that education in the homes. We have a cultural problem. Our culture does not support some of the advocacy that civil society groups undertake. Why? Because beating on wives it has always been a part of our culture. We laugh at the saying from Sierra Leone. Half of me is from Sierra Leone. There was a saying: if your man no beat you, mean your man no love you. Your wife ain't love your wife. Yeah. And I can say this: I grew up in a home where my dad beat on my mom, and when this situation happened, Dr. Clinton, I was so emotionally moved. I had to call my mom and tell her, I said, I'm so grateful that you're still alive. Because all it took was him hitting you one time, and I probably would not have been with a mom. I'm happy that I still have you. And so I think one approach, and you asked the question, what is the most effective approach? A part of the reason why we're having this conversation is because, again, we're not convicting Mr. Jackson, but we've seen a lot of pictures that speaks to domestic violence in so many ways. Some of the pictures we've seen, she could not have had those injuries by falling down from the bed or getting drunk and falling in the street. No. Somebody died in the process. And I think putting forward the worst possible scenario. I mean, between my wife and I, we have 7 daughters. Any of those beautiful women could end up like this lady, any of them. And I do not, as a father, as a husband, I do not want to see any of my girls or my wife or my sisters, becoming a victim like we've seen this lady. And so I think a very effective approach to this is to put forward in front of our society the possibility of losing our daughters, our mothers, our sisters, simply. And I focus more on the ladies because that's, in many ways, that's what we hear more of. I grew up in Stephen Talbot Estate, and I knew a woman who would beat up on her husband because she knew karate. She was a security officer with Victoria Talbot those days, and she would beat up on the man, but it's more prevalent with men beating on women than women beating on men. But more so and scarier is the possibility that all it takes is just one hit and a life will be lost. A life will be lost. And so there's a lot all of us can do. This is part of the education process. But for us to take this to our homes, talk to our daughters. As fathers, our job is to speak to our daughters and let them know that they have our support. Councillor King talked about, trauma bonding, conditioning, and stigmatization. Now, at home, if you have families providing the support for their loved ones, the stigmatization, the mentality of bonding around trauma will be reduced. And so it has to start from the home. It has to go into the churches, into the communities. We have to train our boys to ensure that strong men don't beat on women. Strong men don't beat on women. Weak men do that. And so we have to approach it from a more strategic standpoint, educating our boys, educating our girls to not accept it. I think any man putting his hand on a woman should be the last time that woman is with him. Once we start to set those standards, a lot is going to change. And I think the reality of this situation is an opportunity for social renewal and national transformation. As soon as we can begin to understand what adverse effect a situation like this can have on our families, the sooner the transformation will begin in our homes, in our society.
Yeah.
And that, before I get to Anthony King, I want you to take it further, Dr. Williams. Our institution of government, we have ministries and agencies. There are women who are there, who are working. I mean, let's speak to what it actually is in practical terms. A woman seeking a job, a man in a position of power, right? And will solicit. And I mean, are there laws? I work in the United States yet. There is that policy that is in the break room telling you about sexual harassment. At my job, you got to sign up to it every year that I will not engage. You understand? And if I ever engage, they completely have the right to take action. I will get to Councilor King on the enforcement aspect of it, but I want to speak more to institution now, putting in the policy and enforcing it in our institution of government. Do we have these things clearly stated as policies at the ministries and agency in Liberia?
We again, our society is evolving, and it has taken too long for us to evolve. The war did not help that situation. Successive governments after the war did not put in place those guideposts to ensure that society will evolve better. Anthony, I'll be quick to say I am one of those who didn't follow those rules. And I've had, luckily we've come to a society where things are done differently. Because when you're back home and you're part of that muddy water, you don't see how dirty the water is because we're all swimming in it. When you've taken yourself away from it and you've worked in an environment where there are rules, they're spelled out, and you must conform to those rules or get out, you see it differently. And so, as one who have in many ways abused that ugly situation we have in Liberia, I have made it my duty to reach out, even to people I may have offended or abused in my own way, reached out to say it can be done differently. And we apologize for some of the excesses we put out there while we were in positions of trust and took advantage of the positions we had. Until we start to do that, our society is not going to change. We who have perpetrated some of these actions on others have to be man enough, women enough to go out and say, I was wrong for doing what I did, and I'm sorry. But this is where our society needs to go. And so we have to take ownership. We have to take ownership if our society has to change. We have to take ownership.
So true, Doc.
Unfortunately, not many of us are prepared to take ownership of the situation.
And you are right about that, especially people who have been consumed by power right now, right?
Yeah.
Anthony King. So let's come
Yes,
to the
sir.
law enforcement aspect, access to justice and protection, right? So my question is, how effective is Liberia's current legal framework in addressing GBV? Are our laws strong enough, or is it that the real challenge about enforcement, access to justice, what it actually is?
Okay, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to the crime of gender-based and passed the Domestic Violence Act. So the law is there, is on the book effective,
Mhm.
but when it comes to access to justice for domestic violence, before we come to the effectiveness of the system in prosecuting these violations,
Mhm.
it is it being reported in the first place?
Okay. So we have a reporting issue and we have an enforcement issue. That okay? I mean, sorry, Anthony King. Oh, I think her internet is having some issue there with her connection. Let's see if we can get her back. But while we, wait for her connection to stabilize, Dr. Kim, let's come to the mental health and trauma aspect of it. How does gender-based violence impact the mental health of survivors? And what long-term psychological effect do you see most often in the clinical work area?
All right. Before I even address that, I took down some points that I wanted to add to when Dr. Williams mentioned them.
Okay.
He talked about talking to your daughters.
Mhm.
I say you can talk, but you be the example. People tend to learn from what we do or what they see more than what we tell them. And I'm talking about our children. The other factor that he mentioned, but Councillor King was going to that end before she lost signal, is the reporting aspect of it. And he said that there are more female victims than male. Statistically, you can argue that point. Theoretically, there's also a part of it that tells you that men don't report as much for fear of being embarrassed. So they teach you to grow up as a man. You don't cry. Technically, you don't show emotions, right? So when something like that happens and you call the cops, tomorrow your friends are laughing at you. Maybe men like you let a woman slap you and you call the police. Nobody sees the point where you're trying to prevent this situation from escalating, taking into consideration the power, physical strength difference between you and the.
Sorry, I dropped off.
Yes. So I'll stop. I was just making points on some other things. So I'll stop and then I'll come back to my question when Councillor
Okay.
King is fully.
Yeah. So Anthony King, please continue.
Hello? You said I
Yeah,
should
go
continue?
ahead.
Yeah, please do. Mhm.
Okay, so like I was saying, Liberia has some of the best laws on the books. But when it comes to this gender-based violence, people need to test the system. For many years in Liberia, people thought that gender-based violence or domestic violence was a private thing between married people or people in relationships. And so you will hear people say that, oh, you can't talk in a people marriage, or that married people think you can talk inside. So that man will be beating his wife, giving her a busted nose, a busted knee, and the neighbors will be afraid to say something. But today in Liberia, domestic violence is a crime that is subject to fines, that is subject to prison sentences. So people need to know that these things can be reported, the system can be tested, and justice can be acquired. but it will be left with 1 or 2 persons to take the first steps to report this to the police. Victims need to be encouraged to speak out. People need to stop shaming victims. People need to stop asking victims, "Oh, what took you so long to speak out?" Being a victim of domestic violence is not an easy thing. And just like rape, when people are asking rape victims, "Oh, do you have proof?" If you keep questioning victims like that, then victims will continuously shy away from telling the story. And victims will continuously shy away from trying to seek legal remedy. So I think it is all of us business to see how we can go about ensuring that domestic violence is prosecuted. You can start by encouraging the victim to speak out. You can start by stop questioning the victim as to why it took her 5 years to say something. You can start by reporting to the police if you see someone being domestically violated. But I can tell you for sure that the law is on the book and the system can be tested and justice can be acquired.
And so, in essence, you were saying earlier before you drop out, we have a reporting issue. Not many people are willing to report when it happens, and then the enforcement. And you also mentioned, well, the laws on the books are good enough to hold the society accountable, most of perpetrators, but the enforcement aspect. And the other aspect is access to justice, Anthony King. Access to justice. Do people get justice when they go to court, when these violence happen? What are the
So like I was
challenges?
saying before I went off, nothing in Liberia works as perfectly as it should. Okay? But yes, there's justice to be gotten. It may take long. Our courts are slow. We don't have specialized to handle most of these things. We don't have a particular court to say this court handles domestic violence so that domestic violence cases will be handled on a speedy level. So it will take some time. It will take you some time if you go to seek justice through the courts. But yes, there are public defenders. There are people who the government has lawyers to represent people who cannot afford to hire a private lawyer. And eventually justice will be acquired. The government has a lot more to do in ensuring that these domestic violence victims get justice speedily. But until that time, we as a country, we as individuals, we can take the steps to ensure that justice is acquired, whether it takes us a long time or not.
Thank you. Dr. Clinton?
Yeah. So, Councillor King, when you say there's not a court exclusively set up to prosecute domestic violence cases, does that mean there's no family court in the judicial system?
So for now, the judiciary does not have what we call a family court. So we have a juvenile court where we handle children business.
Yes.
We have the court that handles rape. We have the criminal courts that handle other crimes, but we do not have a family court. That is something that is in the works that I've heard that the judiciary is working on, but that has not been executed yet.
Okay. So what I say to that, going back to the question posed to me, what I say to that is that the laws are on the books, but that is not enough. And the implementation is delayed because there is the evolution to that stage where you have a family law code on and the whole nine yards. However, maybe our role from a social standpoint is to empower people by creating awareness where you know what is not acceptable and what is affecting you emotionally or mentally. We have to be able to empower people. We can only do that through advocacy, and we can do that through, because it is the awareness that's going to feed the advocacy and vice versa. So risk is based on history, if you ask me. So if there's not an exclusive court to process these things and the length of time it takes to get justice, those are some of the factors that are affecting the statistics. Because what if before we can even get a hearing date, my perpetrator has decided to leave the country? And we've seen these things happen. So that's a loss. And there are multiple examples that we can set. But going back to your question about trauma. So trauma is an emotional response to distressing situation. It doesn't have to be domestic violence related, just anything for that matter. I had a good conversation with my daughter, and we were talking about the war, and I was talking about the collective experience and how Americans, everything is a problem. I said, I went to school and nobody would dare to bully me. The bully first attempt was his last mistake. And once we cleared that side, the bully wanted me now as friends. And then she said to me, trauma is trauma. Forget your culture. Just because your culture doesn't define it as trauma does not take away from the definition. I mean, it was kind of profound for me. Yes, trauma is trauma. And then later on in life, you see these things affecting people and you're surprised just because your culture didn't define it, but trauma is trauma. So that emotional, we even have what we call adverse childhood effects, the A's, which also affect your adulthood and your relationships. Okay. Now, anybody who has experienced trauma could be diagnosed or have symptoms of PTSD, which we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that means is that you experience trauma to the point where the effect of the trauma remains with you, and it can be anything from nightmares to vivid experiences that remind you of the situation. I use myself. Leaving Liberia and stay in Ghana for some time. The Christmas celebration, the loud firecrackers, we call them, was an issue. But my resilience, which some of it I will attribute to my ego, like, oh no, this can't be me, it can't happen to me. So I kind of breathe it. I came to America, we have July 4th, so I had to take my children out. But I reminded myself that I had to do that for my children before a long time. That sound always reminded me of where I came from. And my youngest son would say, so don't you think you have PTSD? No, I don't. I don't have PTSD. I may have experienced some sort of traits of it or traces of it, whatever you want to call it, where every time I heard a loud sound, I felt like the war. It reminded me of the war. But then there are people who are really diagnosed. And so coming back to victims diagnosed with PTSD, physical feature similar to your abuser can be intimidating. Body posture can be intimidating. Sounds, environment, interaction, conversations can put you in a place where it's traumatic for you, but it comes from that experience. And then you have people who decide that I'm stronger than this, but then eventually it breaks you down emotionally. So that stress produces depression. Because before your abuser gets a total control of you, that abuser does everything possible to cut off your support network. So those seven girls in Dr. Williams who built that sisterhood, and who he starts to make sure, first of all, Councillor King is too smart. She does law school. Every week you gotta go to game together. I'll cut that off because she coming now to educate you. Then I'm coming to tell you how Councillor King is even abusing her husband because she knows law and she knows the people in the judicial system. So my wife now starts to be exclusive to me. Then the other sister who is just so empowered with self-esteem, I gotta make sure I take that one up. Dr. William asked for him as your power will be the reason you don't enjoy your wedding or your marriage. So when I cut those people off and they work with me, that's what happened to Heather Nussbaum. He said, the time you take to travel on the train and all of that to get to work, you can work from home and be my personal secretary. So she was doing all of the legal document and everything. Still, like, we're home and we're working, but we kept you isolated. And so when that depression comes, when that trauma comes, survival is hard. One of the things you said, it may not be the terminology, but you said, let's stop questioning victims. And I think that you meant stop questioning their motives, because you will re-traumatize the victim with your questioning. But one thing I always encourage people to form of questioning. What's wrong with you builds up a defense right away. Think about it. Psychologically, if you just got out of a fight and I say, what's wrong with you? I'm already telling you that this is unbecoming. This is not even part of what I expect. You should not be in a fight. Nobody should push you to a fight. You should be responsible for your actions. So now I start to bring in questioning about your emotional intelligence. So the safe thing to do is ask, what happened? What happened puts that person in a space to provide you details. And of course, you may have to ask more probing questions as you go along, but that person becomes comfortable, relaxed enough to tell you what happened, because that question comes without judgment. So that's the question to ask, what happened? So for the traumatic part of it, it's like you bought food to eat and you didn't buy water to drink. You get choked. So one is tied to the other in the long run. And that's when therapy becomes important, significant. You go to therapy, and some people go to see psychiatrists because you even need medication, because the depression has already kicked in. And the third aspect of that is, from the PTSD or the depression, some people contemplate suicide. That's how significant it gets. That's how far it goes. Some people become so worthless to the point where the self-esteem is gone. And they figure out that I'm not worth it, because here's my abuser telling me nobody else wants me. And sometimes they say to you, what man will marry you with 3 children? You already got 3 children for me. You better sit down. You better stay here. And you believe those things. You believe those things. And then we have what we call the battle woman syndrome, where you get to the point where you're even starting to defend his behavior. Your mother is telling you, I'm observing this. Oh, no, ma. The work sending him. Well, your husband been working for 5 years. All of a sudden, he work just sending him. He's not coming home. He's just going out of town. But you've been there so long. The other aspect I want you to take to note is learned helplessness. So I'm giving you different names. Battle woman syndrome, learned helplessness, where you have endured the behavior from the other person so long that there's nothing to do. You don't even have an escape plan. You don't even have the willingness to contact external authorities to get them involved. The history of the system is there's no family law court, so your case sits on somebody's desk on the docket for extended period of time while the behavior is continuing, to the point where the person. And that's why when we migrate from third world countries, for that matter, because I've worked with all kinds of people from different backgrounds, different countries, when you get here, it's different, and the struggle is even more.
Clayton?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
That made me come in. You are saying something very important, and the scenario that you are narrating is a real life scenario. Okay, this is this woman, as you put the example, who is a victim, and let's say she have 3 children by this man, and she's like, where can I go with all these 3 children? If we look at the fact that she's a victim or she's being abused, logically, the right thing to do is to get out of that abusive home. Now, then comes the reality. Who is out there, be it a family, be it an institution, that's going to accept her, even if they're going to meet her physical needs? What's about her emotional needs? What's about the ties, right, that she built with this person, the bond, that's the word I was looking for, the bond she built with the person, and the bond she and this man share collectively with the children. That is the difficult part sometimes that made these victims to say. So my question there is, what should be the best remedy here? Is it the person who is the perpetrator must be talked to, that this is wrong, you need this woman, a woman need you for you to bring the children up, or to say, you know what, let the woman go away, let go, the man will not change. Real life situation, what is the best approach here? Because it's difficult to stay. Mm-hmm.
All right. So the best approach, again, is where we are now. Ask yourself this question. Why are we having this conversation now, in this moment? Why? Why is this conversation not necessary on a daily basis? It's only necessary when there is complete tragedy. Why? Because the society has made it normal, and so we operate within the norms. Fine. Don't talk about it until it happens. Now, you're saying she has children, they create a bomb, blah, blah, blah. My question for you is, what is she teaching these children by staying with an abuser? What is she teaching them? To be submissive, even when the situation is not conducive for you?
And then the other question is, if she leaves and pull these children, as in the cases of some women, when I want to go with my children, I don't trust them anymore because he's being abusive. Mm-hmm. What is she also teaching them? Something positive?
She is teaching them empowerment. Mm-hmm. She is teaching them to reject abuse. She is teaching them to stand up to their perpetrators if they ever encounter that in life. And hopefully, she is teaching them to be outspoken. So see something, say something, especially for girls. And let me tell you the other part. As a father with daughters, you are their first definition of a man. So you train them to be attracted to men like you.
Internet.
Okay? So when they leave home or when they start to date, I have a friend who doesn't have a boyfriend. And one day she said, because my father was abusive, a lot, if not all of my siblings, my sisters, are attracted to abusive men. But I refuse. So by the time I see the sign, you're gone. I see the sign, you're gone. She said, you don't even visit my house for overnight when we're dating. You pay for trips for us to go. Neutral ground. When we get to that exclusive relationship stage, we will spend nights with each other. But you're not going to come in my space and get comfortable during the dating. But that's her experience because she's been to school and educated herself and participated in these seminars and conversations. But the national discourse alone is a starting point. Encouraging people to stay because of the children is never a good idea. You die protecting the children and leaving them defenseless. So I always say to my children, I protect you because I don't have the means to defend you. And how do I protect you? By teaching you the right things and by leading by example. So that's what it has to be where the society is promoting men to be more responsible and more accountable for their behaviors, even if we don't have the laws on the books. Your brother or your friend said to you the other day when we were hanging out, the way you spoke to your wife was disrespectful. hold you accountable, put you in that place where you learn that you can go back and apologize and mean it and do your best not to repeat that behavior. But we don't have those things because, again, culturally, this has come a long way. And I don't want to make any reference to the specific case with, which is the premise for why we're having this conversation. But I saw an interview where the perpetrator asked the question, don't couples typically fight? Like, that's the norm. And the society has perpetrated the impunity concept. And it's not just domestic violence. There were a bunch of girls who were sexually assaulted under the name of educating them. What is it called? Mean, whatever that school was called.
Me too.
Yeah.
I think it was Me Too. It's not a Me Too movement, but there was a social worker who came from the States with funds to establish
a boarding school program for young
school
girls.
for girls. And she lays with recruit students from West Point and other places. Those girls were sexually assaulted. Some of them even contracted HIV.
That's correct.
Okay. Nobody advocated for them. The laws on the book did not serve justice in their favor. I specifically wrote to government officials asking what could be the recourse of this. I never got one response back. Not one. But those are the kind of things that have caused society to say, this is what will come out of it. This is freelance. We do whatever we want. All right. We leave this situation and we go to the white evangelist who came to Liberia as a missionary or an evangelist, whatever, and married this girl, and people were blaming her. The man told you he was married, he introduced you to his wife, and his wife told you that it's okay to marry, and your parents agreed for you to marry. You went to court and she came out crying right in the yard of Temple of Justice. Do we recall that? Or I'm the only person who's remembering that?
I recall that.
Yes. She came from there. And what they had to say? The state's attorney had a poor case. Her lawyer had a poor evidence-driven case to convict the man. How? You had eyewitnesses. You had other evidence with the tire rim or whatever he used to try.
Yeah, physical evidence on her body.
But he walked. Yes. And he walked free. He came back to the States where he knew he would have never walked. But our society has to implement the law. Now, the other thing is, Frederick Douglass, I think it was, who said it's easier to raise strong boys than to repair broken men. Go to the schools, encourage the students to form organization. Now, in America, they have something called the DARE program, and it was Dare to Do Drugs. So students were joining and they were trying to discourage, the drug epidemic. In America, they've done teenage pregnancy, and the girls don't even take part in anymore. So the girls are excelling when it comes to academics. All right. Let the school, under the mentorship of teachers or even volunteers, establish those things to create awareness in the young ones. Start at the root. I was in the 5th grade in Lutheran school, and they asked me to be president. They voted for me to be president of my class. I went home and told my father, but I didn't like it. I don't like politics at all. And my father told one of his friends, and the man said to him, cotton tree grows with a thorn. I didn't understand what that meant. And then fast forward in adult life, he said, if you have qualities, they come with you from there. They are innate. So if we start teaching these young people now, especially the girls, to develop self-esteem and reject those behaviors. My daughter I saw a guy. I said, I like the guy. He said, no. She said, no. He called me with his index finger. That is not for me. So she never dealt with him. Those simple things. Now, some of us are privileged to be exposed to these examples in the society. So we come home and we share them with our children. Everybody's not privileged. You know, I bet you go to Councillor King's house, anything about law, you bring up with her children, they're able to stand the defense. But they may miss that psychological impact, but they will be able to tell you the law. According to the law, you can't do this, you can't do that. You go to Dr. William House. In fact, everybody in your house is educated because he promoted education. So some of us have the opportunity to work in these various positions and experience these people.
Thank you.
Anthony,
Mhm.
Anthony, let me. So
But
just
we come
just
back
begin-
to the society and learn our experiences. That's my
yeah,
go ahead.
just piggybacking on what you just said, brings us to this point of our laws being very porous, meaning there are too many loopholes that lawyers. First of all, it's a question of adequate training of our lawyers, but also there are too many weaknesses, technical weaknesses. Do I say in the law, or that lawyers are prone to taking advantage of, that affords, for example, a lot of these perpetrators to walk free? I know, for example, Hans Williams did go, and his wife went to jail for a while. They're out now. The Shalom Musu case is a case in point that is still hanging legally in the air. We haven't been able to find pinpoint anyone in terms of who did the crime. And it is highly likely the most recent youth and sports alleged rape situation that was squashed based on technical grounds, whatever the police investigation was. But there are many others that have gone through the cracks because
we don't know.
yes, and so Councillor King, what can be done to close those cracks? Because a lot of these cases will go through the cracks. If we're not careful, even this current case might go through the crack based on technical grounds. We have a capacity issue, technical gaps, but in terms of the law, how can we close those gaps? Or do you recognize that those gaps exist, and what can we do to address them?
So, Dr. Williams, you see what you refer to as gaps are some of the ways under our law by which the rights of a criminal defendant can also be upheld. In a criminal case, there is the prosecution, which is the government acting as the lawyer for whoever the victim is. And then there is the defendant, who is also defended by a team of lawyers. Okay? And under Liberian law, a criminal defendant is innocent until proven guilty. So we have two kinds of cases that go on in the courts. It's either a civil case or a criminal case. So in civil cases, the plaintiff or the complainant has to prove their case by a preponderance of evidence. That's the word that they use in the law. That means you only have to prove your case by sufficient evidence. But in criminal cases, the prosecution have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is where the problem comes in most of the times. And we, from the outside, would not be able to see everything that goes on in the criminal trial, but we feel like, oh, these are gaps in the law that the other lawyers take advantage of. But those are the standards that are set by our laws. And the only thing that I can say to criminal prosecutors is you have to tighten your evidence, because the burden of proof on prosecution is higher. I don't want to say unfortunately, but because the rights of a criminal defendant also have to be protected. Because even though we are trying to send to prison somebody who may or most likely committed a crime, if those standards are not put in place, somebody who did not commit a crime but is accused of committing a crime will also be put away because we didn't protect their rights. So the burden is on prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that is why we try to talk to people, the online lawyers, the online investigators, that these popular cases, such as the Samuel Jackson and Tony Jackson case, we need to be careful about what we say on social media. We need to be careful about what we put out there, how we talk about the case. Because all of these conversations we have online may affect the prosecution's case. It may hinder whether justice will be acquired for Tony Jackson or not. So if you feel like you have a piece of evidence, you may reach out to the prosecution team. You may provide your investigative support. But once you have, for example, the way this Tony Jackson case is all over Facebook now, and the prosecution wants to take this case to court, one method the defense counsel may use is to ask for a change of venue, for example, to say that Mr. Jackson cannot be prosecuted in Montserrado because where will you find a jury in Montserrado now that has not heard about this case? It's everywhere on Facebook. It's everywhere on the social media. So defense will now say this man will not get a fair trial in Montserrado. So please send the case to Lofa. If you're going to send the case to Lofa and pick a jury from Lofa, are we sure that the pool of jurors from Lofa will be able to listen to prosecution's case and have the intellect to see the evidence and decide a proper verdict? So all of these things will affect the case. And that is why we say prosecution has to do their best to hold the evidence tight, to track all of the evidence to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Because this kind of cases will definitely be tried before a trial jury. And it is a pool of lay people. These people are not lawyers. They have the tendency to become biased based on what they hear on social media or see on social media. So it is a lot for prosecution to prove. But like I said, all of these procedural grounds on which sometimes the cases get dismissed is put in place to also protect the rights of the criminal defendants.
Thank you.
Anthony, we got some questions in the chat.
Okay, I would just wanted to read a number out for those who might be interested to call. Those of you listening, the number is on the screen. It has been pasted in both Facebook and YouTube Live there. It's 605-313-6004. Enter the code 791-403#, and then you will be connected. If you have a comment to make, if you have a question for any of the panelists, you can ask your question. If you have any contribution to make, we will value that contribution. That you want us to go to some comments there. This is a question here from Debia. The question here: if a partner reports the issue to the police, what happens to the perpetrator? I think this is one of the fears, especially if children are in the picture. The victim feels bad reporting. Maybe the victim feels bad, I'm reporting my son or my daughter's father to the police. Maybe the child not understanding it would hit the mother. If the mother who made the report, something like that, this question this person is asking. Is there any other one that you were trying to speak to? That is the only question I see.
Caleb was all right.
Okay, so can I just speak to that?
That's the one for now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
So when it comes to reporting is not always for maybe sending the perpetrator to prison or to prosecute the perpetrator at the time of the reporting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But reporting is also for the purpose of evidence building. Because like we see in most domestic violence cases, the victims go up for the perpetrator. Most times people who are violated, people who are abused, They don't usually say, "Oh, this my husband is abusing me," or that this person beat me. No, sometimes they cover up, and then after covering up for years, and when it reaches to the point where you can no longer take it or your life is at stake, if you decide to go forward, people doubt you because all these years you've been covering up for this person. So sometimes the purpose of reporting is to document your story, is to document your evidence, even if the police will not reach out to that person. And from experience, the police will not reach out unless you have facilitated that process for them to reach out, or unless you have facilitated that process to say, "Oh, can you call him to a conference?" or "I want to take the matter to court." The police will not by themselves take on your case. So I will encourage any victim. I understand you don't want your children's father to go to prison, or you don't want your children's father to get into trouble. But for your self-preservation, you should report. If you're abused once or twice, and you have injuries, take pictures, go to the police station, make a statement. It's for the purpose of documenting your case so that eventually, when you decide to prosecute, there can be a record trail to show that, okay, in February of 2023, this man hit on this woman, she reported. In January of 2024, it happened again. She reported, so that there can be a record trail and a lineup of evidence so that your case is not difficult to prove.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I think we are about an hour and 30-minute mark. I mean, this has been a very informative discussion on gender-based violence. I would love for us to have the same panel back and have part 2 of this very important discussion on a very sensitive topic. We don't have a caller yet, so I don't know what you think. Should we get some parting statements?
Well, we could. If we could just look at the psychosocial profile of abusers, which we've already spoken to. Yeah, so we can wrap it up. We think our 2 experts have done enormously well in providing us insights from the legal standpoint, from the mental health standpoint. Again, we don't want to go too much into the Toonie and Samuel Jackson case. I would have loved for us to maybe just look at Samuel Jackson and his actions in the immediacy of the event, and how that, what does that reveal to us? Without indicting him, but what does that reveal to us about? I know Councillor King initially talked about how perpetrators tend to project themselves. You see a level of deflection, and deflection is major, how they turn the tables around away from themselves to others as well. Some of the initial comments. Give us a sense, if you can, give us a sense of how Mr. Jackson's actions in the immediacy of the event speak to what to look for in these victims, because deflection tends to be the first approach, and then Councillor King talked about the deflection in terms of making victims feel like they're the reason why things happen the way they happen. From a mental health standpoint, how can we, in terms of detecting some of these situations from happening, even if we're not clear on what's happening at home, what are some signs that we can look for in perpetrators? I mean, I know it's a gray area, but there are sure signs of who perpetrators are, especially from the physical standpoint. The mental, is a challenge, but from a physical standpoint, what can we look for as a society to help victims? Dr. Clinton?
I think his connection is not good.
Yeah. Councillor King, you could throw light on that. I mean, even from the legal standpoint, what do we look for in these perpetrators to help victims, help to support victims, even before we have situations like Tony's?
Okay.
All right, yeah.
Dr. Clinton is back. Dr. Clinton, Dr. Wallen had asked a question. I think your connection was a little challenged there, so you may not have gotten the question.
We good? Can you guys hear me?
No.
Yeah, we can hear you. I think Dr. Clinton connection was not strong enough, so he didn't hear you. Maybe you can just summarize the question for him to.
So, from a psychosocial perspective, Dr. Clinton, what can we look for? What signs can we look for other than I know
If you can
most
repeat the question.
Yeah. What signs can we look for to help support victims beyond the bruises and what have you? What signs are visible on the end of the perpetrators that we can see beforehand? Because a keen look at some of these issues and looking at and examining some of the actions that we've seen in the immediacy of the event with the Jacksons, we see that there are lots of anomalies in the actions of Mr. Jackson. Are some of those signs, without naming anyone specifically, are some of those signs prevalent in other perpetrators as well? That will inform us beforehand inform us in helping victims before situations get to where it's gotten in the last week or so in Monrovia. What are some things to look for to help victims before it gets worse?
I think Dr. Clinton still may not be.
It's frozen?
Yeah.
That's okay?
Yes, sir.
Did you pick up on that question? Are there things to look for? Not necessarily from the legal standpoint, but just beyond the bruises, are there things we can spot or we should pay attention
You mean
to?
people from the outside?
Yes.
Hmm.
So as to be able to help the situation before it gets worse. Because we're blinded by a lot of things until, the action actually happens. It may be happening behind closed doors. Are there things we can spot?
Yeah, and Anthony Clinton, I think that's a William's question, especially for those who are close to the individuals
The
involved.
situation, yeah.
Using the Jackson as an example, they had close friends, and
Right.
they were hearing things. They knew some things. It's like they overlook the potential of those things that they knew and heard, and either they never reported, either their intervention was not strong enough, to prevent an escalation of the issue, and now boom. So I think that's a well question is those who are close to a victim or perpetrator or who are aware of a situation of abuse, what should they be looking for and what is a good time for them to intervene? Instead of just saying, well, I don't think we'll get serious. They just talk about it casually, and before they know it, it's late, and now someone's life is gone in this case.
Okay, so I think it's a couple of things.
Mhm.
For example, these abusers will sometimes try to distract the public with a lot of public display of affection, maybe posting on Facebook, But when you are in close proximity to the couple, sometimes you can tell that the abuser always talks to their partner in a condescending manner, that the abuser speaks to the partner in a disrespectful manner. So something like that. And then I think the Jacksons, who said he went to lunch or to dinner with the couple and noticed that the lady was wearing is sunglasses. Sometimes if you see someone wearing sunglasses at an odd hour of the day, or if the person looks withdrawn, if you know the person to be a jovial person or a lively person, the person is a bit withdrawn, even in the presence of their partner. So I think those are signs that can show that something is going wrong here,
Something's
and
wrong.
maybe you need to speak to one of the parties to see what is going on.
Yeah,
True.
and that, I think that is something significant there that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And because one of the accounts was at some point, Tony will wear sunglasses, and there was an account that she confided in somebody and took off the sunglasses and say, "Do you see?" And and I think it was a very good friend to Mr. Jackson, who the account said may have talked to Mr. Jackson. But I think that's where he stopped. He didn't anticipate that it could escalate to the point where she will lose her life, as it had happened. And so let's bring it to Dr. Clinton. Dr. Clinton,
Dr. Clinton.
yeah, Dr. Clinton, the question here is, what are some of the things those who are in proximity with, say, a couple or a victim of a perpetrator should look for? Maybe you are close to a family, for example. And what are the things you should look for that warrant an intervention or a report to prevent, a potential disaster?
And the best times to intervene.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Again, without saying much about this case, because I don't want to be one of those people who is in a hypocritical position where I'm condemning the act, but I'm also
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you please make a little adjustment so that we can see your face?
Oh, okay.
Excellent. Right there is good. Yes, sir.
I don't know how long I can keep it here for. Okay, I'll just hold it up. All
Okay,
right.
yeah.
So I was saying I don't want to be one of those people who is hypocritical in condemning the public intervention to preempt all of this and then be the same person exhibiting it. But to answer your question, there are various signs which the counselor mentioned some of. There will be physical signs. But what you're looking for mainly is behavioral signs. What I mean by that is an outgoing person continues to isolate and withdraw. You may want to ask questions. A productive person without any obvious stimuli is becoming less interested in the things that you know that person to be interested in.
Okay.
And those conversations are private. They're not accusatory in any form, but they're private because you are concerned. What you may want to do is also be very careful, because you could drive the victim away from you, especially for somebody who has come to that place of learned helplessness or the battered woman syndrome, where they're always going to deflect every time you bring up the conversation. But before I experience all of the technical issues, Councillor King spoke to the question from Debbie, what happens to the guy? And I think she said, every time you file a complaint, it's not for prosecution, but it can help you build up evidence on the day you decide to prosecute. In my experience, you don't decide to prosecute the person. The law does. So whenever you file a complaint, that's automatic process there is an automatic initiation of the process to prosecute. Now, if you choose not to press charges, I mean, as far as I know in America, if you choose not to press charges, that's fine. But once the police is made aware and an arrest is necessary, that's criminal charge, that person will be persecuted. Okay, so we'll go to court. And you can come to court and say, I don't want you to prosecute this guy, blah, 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 blah. They don't care. All right. Now, what happens to him? What happens to the children if children are involved and he has to be detained? Unfortunately, that's the law. But the children's survivor depends on him. So maybe that's part of the reason when he has all of the power of providing. So you're not doing anything. You feel that if he goes, we're stuck. So that's fear over necessity. And sometimes you stay for the provision, but you die in the process. How is it beneficial to you or to the children? And then Dr. Williams mentioned something about the psychosocial profile. Believe it or not, statistics, research have shown over a period of time that most perpetrators were also abused themselves. As we earlier spoke to childhood unresolved issues. And sometimes as parents or as partners, we don't realize that it affects children. So they hear the loud, they hear the exchange, they hear the fights. They don't have to witness it to be affected. Some of the effects children get is even children pee in bed to late age. The grades drop in school. Those are the things that teachers are supposedly trained to look out for and inquire to find out what environment this child is currently residing and how it's affecting this child's development. But some of those things are missed, and they come to what, like I said, intergenerational transmission of violence. So some of the perpetrators, even people who are sex offenders, research will show that some of those people were abused themselves. That doesn't make it right. But I like that question because when you get into the psyche of some of these people and their behavior, it may help us understand better to know how to approach these things and prepare the upcoming generation for what may come. And we were talking about physical signs. So you're wearing dark shades at night, you're wearing dark shades throughout, you're limping, you're wearing hand brace. And just the other piece is that some of the scars you don't see, not just the physical scars that are covered with clothing, but there are emotional scars that you don't see. And by observation, you notice that some of these people just suddenly become introverted for whatever reason. But being a close family member, a friend, you can inquire. Like I said, these conversations have to be private. Because when it becomes public, people tend to get upset because, again, you don't have full control over where you discuss or you inquire about my personal experiences. So some people wait until you're in a public. And they say, but why are you wearing dark shades 8 o'clock? It makes the victim embarrassed because even if you remove the shades at 8 o'clock at night, people see them up. And some people get upset and say that you're trying to talk about me in the guise of protecting me because you wait until people are there to talk about my issue. That's the time you want to show concern. So we have to first examine ourselves and how genuine we are when it comes to being concerned about these people and these issues and address it. I have a lot of Liberians I talk to and I'll say, you're not alone, and I leave it there. But the support has to come from within and without. And if he goes to jail because he did something
that cause you harm, and it's potentially going to cause worse harm or more harm. Liberia is a collective society. I guarantee you. I say to the Americans, over here we have a horizontal society where everybody's on an equal line. If your mom put you on 14 welfare, will take care of you until you get there. In Liberia, we have vertical. And that's why when I come into the office and see an older person, I'm able to put hand up to your name before I call your name. But everybody here is equal because the society is structured in that way. But in Liberia, if they arrest him, your children will eat tomorrow. Just by virtue of the fact the nature of the society is supportive, whether we agree or not. I always say they will help you, even if they will talk about you. They will come to help you to get the facts so they can go talk about it. So those are the signs you look out for. And for someone who gets a direct complaint that you can tell this is serious, you may not go to the law because you're saying it's not my place to report my brother. But there are other people who I'm sure have some sort of significant influence on this couple, on this person, on this man, on this woman. I most time tell the victim, what do you want for you? I ask that question. And then my advice to you is, you don't have to take it. And what I'm basically telling you, get out. People call me and say, you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to that person. I'm not going to make a difference. I can quickly make a difference with you. So you get out. You don't need it. You don't deserve it. You've worked for better. Go and pursue better. Sometimes people listen and they leave. One lady told me, I just had a conversation with you, but you didn't know you were giving me free counseling. That particular boy I don't speak to, I block him. I don't do anything. I don't even talk about him. And I'm happy. But you never know the impact you make on people. So you have to be careful when it comes to situations like this. But back to the basis of the question, let's look for more emotional signs than the physical signs. Sometimes you'll never see them because people hide them. But when it comes to emotions, sometimes it's hard to hide even when you try. If you can pick up on those ones, you'll be able to help that person sooner than later.
All right. Thank you. Wow. It has been rich.
Very informative.
Yeah,
Insightful.
very informative. It's always good to have the experts to dissect these things and explain them in both theory and practical terms to bring clarity to them. That I insist, maybe we can have another section to bury the issue for another time.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, so let's get some closing parting words here as briefly as possible. Anthony King, in Liberia we say, ladies and gentlemen, what will be your parting, statement?
Comments.
Yeah.
Okay, so victims, you who we have not heard your story yet, you are listening and you've heard the stories of other people. You've heard the story of Tony Jackson and so many other people whose stories have come to the light. We don't want you to continue to cover up your abuser. One way to get or to start to put an end to this pandemic of domestic violence is to name and shame abusers. And to the rest of the public, like I said earlier, let's support these victims. You may not know what it means for a victim to take a step to get out of the toxic situation that they're in. So when they decide to finally make a move or they decide to finally tell the story, stop questioning their motives, stop questioning their timing, stop questioning their intentions. Just provide them your support so that they can get the help that they need. With that being said, I'm grateful for this opportunity to sit on this panel. And until we see again, thank you for having us.
All right. Dr. Clinton.
Well, it has been
an honorable experience. I've learned some things, like I usually say to my patients, I even learn from you more than you learn from me when I'm on the other side of the table. Because you give me access to your life story, and then I'm challenged to assess my own life story and reflect even as I leave. So I thank you for the opportunity. Now, my parting word will be to the society. Let's implement the laws. Let's create awareness. Let's protect people's rights. Let's talk about human rights and those people who are identified as social activists or advocates. I see them on Facebook, but they come when something has already happened. Advocacy should not be retroactive or reactive. It must be proactive. It must be continuous. Let's talk about it. You're insisting and advocating for another session of this type, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's because even as you tried to do it in 1 hour, it was not enough. You went to an hour and a half, it's still not enough because this topic is significant. It's an epidemic. That's what it is. It's basically, it's one of those things that we don't talk about because we were raised not to talk about these things. They are shameful. They are embarrassing. Just like they tell you as a boy, you don't show emotions. You're man. So even when it hurts you, swallow and move on. Be full of pride. What I would say is, let's get to work. 12 to 13 years ago, I came to Liberia and collected data for my research. And I was doing a research for my dissertation. And it was about the inclusive education in the Liberian school system as it relates to disability. And I shared the outcome with some of the people. I'm not going to even call names. That was very, very fulfilled when somebody said the new public school even has handicap bathrooms. And I said, my research has finally paid off. Somebody heard it, somebody implemented it. Maybe it's not even coming from me, but I'm fulfilled to know that the things that were concerning to me during that process are being addressed. And that's the development process that I'm looking for. And I've always said, if we want to revive Liberia, awareness is our starting point. Awareness of anything. Let's create awareness and we will be able to move forward. And so that's my parting words. Again, I thank you for the opportunity. Hopefully, I was able to contribute to this conversation so much so that it goes beyond this platform and people can see what we're talking about and try to implement some of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Williams?
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me particularly say thanks to Anthony King and Dr. Clinton for availing themselves at very short notice. When the need to have this conversation came about, our radar focused on the two of you, given the access we have to both of you professionals in your own area, and very insightfully the contributions you both bring to the table in terms of helping us educate and inform our population in moving forward. For many who believe that the transformation hasn't started, this is just an example of that process. The more we educate, the greater the pace of the transformation happening in the country. We will hope that this conversation will be the basis for other conversations going on at many different levels, using the local vernacular to hammer home some of the key issues that we've brought forth in this conversation. But thank you so much for coming, Councillor King and Councillor Clinton. Thank you so much to Anthony. Thank you for co-hosting effectively. Hopefully we can do this. Let's see what our ratings look like, and then we can tag team to bring on greater conversations as we move forward. Liberia's transformation depends on all of us. In whatever little way we can, let's add our voices to the process. Let's bring our expertise and experience to the process, because Liberia will not change if we are not changing. If we are not changing. Collectively, we make Liberia. Liberia is not an animal sitting in the bush somewhere. Liberia is us, and we are Liberia. And the more we institute and affect change from a personal perspective to the people next to us, our country is changing. And only we can do it for ourselves. So thank you all again. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks to Dennis for providing us the platform to do this. And we hope we can continue to take advantage of the platform. Thank you again so much. And thank you both for spending your evening with us, whether in Liberia or here in the US. Thank you so much, Sammy, for availing yourself. Yeah.
And I want to join.
Okay, Dr. Williams, thank you so much.
Yes, I want to join Dr. Whitten to say thank you, Dr. Clinton, Anthony King, for your clarity, your courage, and your commitment to this national conversation. What we have heard today is unmistakable. Gender-based violence is not inevitable. It is preventable. But prevention requires more than sympathy. It demands enforcement, education, which we have done today, community leadership. In some way, we provided that today, survivor center services that as a nation we must embark on, and national commitment to justice, which we must also tackle. A safe Liberia is not a dream. It is a decision we must make as a people. One we must make together. And that process has started. We decided that we'll come here and talk about this sensitive issue, which is an epidemic in our society. When we protect the vulnerable, we strengthen the nation. When we uphold justice, we build peace. And when we choose dignity over silence, we move Liberia forward. I cannot thank you enough on behalf of Focus on Liberia. Let this conversation be the beginning. On that note, we will close with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Dr. Joshua Williams will hustle you people again. You can say in the library, we'll hustle you people again and come by and talk some more. Thank you. Enjoy the song, "We Are All Liberians," and bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home.